Thank you very much. So I think we have to move to the next presentation and focus now on Europe. And this presentation will be given by Jaap Hogeling. Jaap is the editor-in-chief of the REHVA journal, so that's the journal of the European HVAC associations. He's also a past member of the board of directors of ASHRAE. He's the treasurer of the Indoor Environmental Quality Global Alliance, of which Arnold was giving some information. And particular of relevance for his presentation here is that he is the chairman of the CEN Standardization Committee 371, which is Energy Performance of Buildings. This committee was created in 2004 and aims to, let's say, streamline all the standards related to the energy performance of buildings. And since 2004, Jaap is the chairman of this committee. So please, Jaap, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you remove this? Well, this slide already says on my my background that was explained by you, Peter. Oh, I have to use the mouse. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, this presentation is about the energy performance of buildings and the impact of the new energy performance of buildings directive related to indoor environmental quality. But first, I will say a few words on why and how we do organize this in Europe and why we have a directive. We have an energy performance of buildings directive, which says at European level that member states should make national regulations to control the energy performance of buildings. This directive is the basis for the national regulations in Europe. And now the directive is revised because of various policy measures like the European Green Deal and the program Fit for 55 by 2030. That means 55% reduction by 2030. The renovation wave, which is also a program to renovate the existing building stock, and the Repower EU plan that was published in May last year because of the energy crisis due to the war in Ukraine. And these policies are all a driver to revise this directive. The question now is, does this impact the energy performance of building standards? Because based on the directive, we developed in CEN, the European Standard Organization, and in ISSO, a set of energy performance of building standards that can be used to assess the energy performance of buildings. And member states are expected to use these standards or national standards that are meeting the requirements as set in these standards. So now the question is there a need to revisit the standards? And that is, well, I could say the answer is yes. And to say a few words about the directive itself, it says that buildings are acknowledged as one of the key factors and key focus areas for the Green Deal and the renovation strategy. And currently, the renovation rate of buildings in Europe is around 1.5%. And then I'm talking about deep renovation to a level that we require by 2030. And this should be doubled to 3% which is quite an effort, giving the workforce you need for that. And then in the renovation wave, we have some focus area, especially tackling the energy poverty of worst performing buildings make them towards healthy housing. And also for the authorities, lead examples for renovating public buildings owned by the authorities. And the decarbonization of the energy delivered to and exported from buildings. That is also a highlight and focus in the renovation wave. To accomplish this, the Commission, European Commission promotes minimum energy performance standards. These are energy requirements for buildings that has to be reviewed regularly in 5 years term. And they should show that the requirements are at least cost optimal, and those requirements shall take into account the general indoor climate conditions in order to avoid possible negative effects such as inadequate ventilation. And the use of energy performance certificates, building and renovation passports, which shall include also the circularity as well as wider benefits on health, comfort, indoor environmental quality, safety, and so on. So it's clear that we also want to address the indoor environment in the new EPBD. So in the Green Deal and the movement to carbon and climate neutral buildings by 2050, we consider the building not longer as just an energy consumer, but also a producer. And we, in the EPBD, we say first we have to, of course, reduce the energy use of a building. So energy efficiency first, look at the building envelope and the systems. Then decarbonize the energy carrier and produce on-site renewables. And the interaction with the energy grid has to be taken place. Smart readiness and it should be operational. It means that the building should know when the grid delivers a very low carbon energy. Step by step towards the zero carbon, we have to show the impact of our components and products in the energy chain. So products like air conditioners or heat pumps are not longer evaluated as a product, just looking at the product label, but as a part of a building system in a holistic way. And finally, we also have to address the embodied carbon. On the EPBD revision, there are also many basic assumptions, as we say, recitals, that are the basis for finally the text of the directive. And one of the recitals is that in the revision process and negotiations between the Commission and the Parliament and the Council of Governments and relevant stakeholders, the need to regulate the energy performance of buildings and the indoor environmental quality of buildings in the same way. So that should be a starting point. And also the energy performance of buildings assessment should be calculated on basis of a methodology, which includes the indoor environmental quality assessment. And the deep renovation shall include aspects like indoor environmental quality, improving the health standards and living conditioning, especially for vulnerable households, because we have also a lot of them in Europe. Other basic assumptions is that the upgrades of the energy performance should include also the health aspect of indoor environmental quality. And energy certificates of buildings should include both data on the energy performance and on indoor environmental quality, and recommendations to improve the energy performance and report about the life cycle analysis and global warming potential. Better high performance buildings should avoid overheating and having improved the indoor environmental quality conditions and care about the microclimate around buildings, which is of course a hot issue in city environments. And delegated acts are needed by 27 on the cost optimality of minimum energy performance towards zero emission buildings, life cycle, global warming potential, respecting at the same time the indoor environmental quality standards. And delegated acts are additions to the directive, which are stronger. They are more a regulation that member states has to follow. These are some slides on the articles on the directive. They are stronger. They are, I just refer to articles that has to do with indoor environmental quality, because in the context of this workshop, this seems most appropriate. Zero emission buildings by 2050, taking into account, amongst others, requirements for indoor environmental quality. The digital building logbook. This is a logbook that will be developed for buildings so that you can follow the renovation step by step. Includes all data, building data such as energy performance, the renovation passport, and the smart readiness indicator, the life cycle global warming potential, the indoor environmental quality, and is also included in this digital building passport logbook that should be added to each building. National renovation plans shall encompass the evidence energy savings, the greenhouse gas reductions, and the wider benefits of indoor environmental quality, and setting the minimum energy performance shall take into account also health indoor conditions based on optimal indoor environmental quality, and these minimum energy performance requirements shall be reviewed every 5 years. And the optimal levels are also required for new and deep renovation buildings within 2 years after this directive is in force, and that is hopefully by this year. Also taking into account climate change risk for the future. The building passports shall comprise information on the circularity as well as wider benefits for health and comfort. And technical building system require installations for measuring control devices for monitoring and regulation of indoor environmental quality at relevant unit level where technical and economical feasible, where measurable health benefits are taken in account for the following buildings. And these are generally zero emission buildings. So these are the buildings that have to be expected to be built after 2030. New buildings, existing buildings which are major renovated, so deeply renovated to zero level. Non-residential buildings with a combined heating and cooling capacity of 70 kilowatts, and public buildings. But it is, of course, said that it should be technical and economical feasible that these measurement and control devices are installed. The economic feasibility should take in account the measurable health benefits. So it is not just calculating if you can save energy with it, but also if you can reach a more healthy building by it. How to do that? That is another question. But member states shall ensure that the data on indoor environmental quality are included in this digital logbook. And the system requirements for non-residential buildings are already in force by 24, when buildings have a capacity of more than 240 kilowatts, and by 29, when it's more than 70 kilowatts, capable to effective indoor environmental quality monitoring to ensure the health and safety of the occupants. In Article 11A, it is said that member states shall set requirements on implementation of those indoor environmental quality standards in order to maintain healthy indoor climate. And in 2 years after the EPBD is in force, these measurable indicators are already included in levels, which is a system in Europe where you can, you could say, have subsidy and financial support available from the European Commission. And this level framework should also include indoor environmental quality requirements on CO2 in rooms, temperature, the relative humidity, the daylight levels, the ventilation rate, and the acoustic comfort. So we still have some discussion with the Commission and with the experts who are working on that, how this should be implemented. And then in the EPBD, it is also said that on indoor environmental quality, that particulate matter of emission of indoor sources and target pollutant limits for indoor sources on VOCs, classified as carcinogenic and mutagenic or toxic for reproduction, according to the regulation in Europe, including formaldehyde, shall be reported on basis of available data at product level or direct measured where available of relevant sources in relation to the indoor environmental situation in the building. So it means that PM 2.5 is also a point of attention in the requirements, set of requirements of indoor environmental quality. And the Commission again is empowered to adopt a delegated act to supplement the directive by establishing a methodology framework for calculating the indoor environmental quality standards and sets of requirements, of course. And the member states shall ensure that new buildings and buildings undergoing major renovation comply with these indoor environmental standards. And in Article 13, it is also said that the Commission shall adopt delegated acts concerning the optional common union scheme for rating smart readiness for non-residential building. And that is important because the smart readiness is also related to how to control the building and how to interact it with the grid on local level. The rating shall be based on an assessment of capability of the building unit to adapt its operation to the needs of the occupant, and in particular concerning the indoor environmental quality and the grid to improve the energy efficiency and the overall performance. So again, with the smart readiness and the grid interaction, indoor environmental quality is also mentioned, which means that you cannot just look at carbon neutrality with and forget about indoor environmental quality. In Article 15 and 16, well, in 15 we say there should be a one-stop shop for energy efficiency, supporting awareness and incentives for regulating the indoor environmental quality. So please don't separate it from the energy performance measures and include it really at the energy performance certificate. The certificate, as was shown in the previous slide, in the previous presentation, with the colors. That sort of certificates shall include recommendations for cost-effective improvement of energy performance to cost-optimal level and reduction of the whole life cycle greenhouse gas emissions and the improvement of indoor environmental quality of a building and a building unit. So we expect that the energy performance certificate will have a page of information also on the indoor environmental quality, and recommendations include in the certificate shall be technical feasible for the specific building and shall provide an estimate for energy savings and the reduction of operational greenhouse gases over the expected service life of the building and the improvement of the indoor environmental quality performance indicators. In Annex 1 of the directive, several standards of the set of EPBD standards are mentioned, the overarching standards, the ISSO 52000 series, the European standard EN 16798-1 on indoor environmental quality, and standards on primary energy and carbon emission factors, or subsiding documents. This provision shall not constitute legal codification of the standards. That means that member states are not obliged to use the standards, but if they don't use the standard, their national method should be according to the standard. So that is a little bit complicated, but that is the way things are done in Europe. The indoor environmental quality standards is about ventilation, is about indoor environmental input parameters for design and assessment of energy performance of buildings, addressing indoor air quality, thermal environment, the lighting and the acoustics. And I think tomorrow there will be a presentation around the update of this standard. And in addition, in Annex 5, we give a template for the energy certificates of buildings. And there you also find that you have to indicate the presence of fixed sensors that monitor the levels of indoor environmental quality, the presence of fixed controls that respond to levels of indoor environmental quality, and the operational fine particulate matters, the PM2.5 emissions, and performance indicators for main categories of indoor environmental quality once relevant provisions apply. So in the Annex 5, it is said what sort of information you should include in the certificate. And there we see also a strong statement on these data. Well, before I end my presentation, I have to say that this presentation is based on a text of the directive that was amended by the European Parliament and published in March this year. Now the Commission, the European Parliament representatives, and the Council is negotiating about the final text. So if all lines I presented here are kept in the final text, I don't know. But for sure is that indoor environmental quality is on the map, and that in the future EPBD and the regulations on energy performance of buildings in Europe, we expect more attention for indoor environmental quality, because the requirements on improving in the requirements for decarbonization should not lead to any risk for indoor environmental climate conditions. And we also have to be aware that a lot of buildings and underperforming buildings at this moment, where we have, you could say, not only a high energy use, but also underperforming indoor environmental quality, we have to improve them to support the health situation for the general population. And I hope most of the lines I presented today will stay. At least I'm sure that the indoor environmental quality will benefit from this new energy performance of buildings directive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaap.